Hello everybody, I'm Roy Vanderveur and welcome to this week's edition of Next Time Try This. I think we've all been here at one point or another. If you haven't yet, well, someday you probably will be, where you're going to have to take the time to diagnose a top-end failure for your two-stroke vintage dirt bike or your modern dirt bike. They all break just the same. And I wanted to share with you some of the resources that I use when it comes to diagnosing a piston failure. If you pull your piston out of your bike and it looks like this, you know, you may not immediately know what that means, because every piston tells a story and it tells you exactly why it failed. It's very common for people to repair the result without repairing the cause. And when you do that, 100% of the time, you're going to be doing it over. It hurts to do it the first time. It really stings when you've got to do it twice. So one of the resources that I use, and these are available online, they're free, it's no big deal, and one that I like to use is a piston analysis from the Rotax Flying Club. That's right, these are aircraft engine. But a two-stroke is a two-stroke is a two-stroke. They all go the same way. So we're going to flip through a couple of these slides. And again, I encourage everybody to take note, rotaxflyingclub.com. Save this to a file somewhere. It's something you'll be able to use all the time or often, help other people. It's a good resource. Starting at the top, we've got normal pistons. Deposits vary from oil ash brown to tan to black brown. Light color denotes higher cylinder temperatures. So this looks like it was running pretty hot, but maybe those aircraft engine, make a little more heat than what our dirt bikes do. Then we'll go to a heat seizure. Excessive heat over 1200 degrees Fahrenheit exhaust gas temperature. Lean jetting or adjustments on the carb are the likely cause of this, or incorrect loading allowing excessive RPM. So if you're over revving your bike, you might end up with that. So let's move on. What do we have next? The infamous cold seizure. This is a thermal imbalance of piston and cylinder wall temperatures, always caused by a lack of warm-up. It's so common. I've got one right here. We'll bring it in. It will always have a seizure on all four corners of the piston. 100% of the time, you got to warm your bike up longer. And if you've got a recent rebuild or it's a brand new bike, your piston tolerances are going to be as tight as they're ever going to be. And that's when these bikes are really susceptible to a cold seizure. And mostly it's a liquid-cooled bike. It can happen on an air-cooled bike, but that's again a lot more rare. So let's see what we have next. Lack of lubrication. Let's back up here, make sure I'm saying the right thing. Yep, under lack of lubrication, this was caused by excessive water ingestion, causing a loss of oil film on the intake. So if you're out there riding your bike like a submarine, splashing through big puddles, pulling water into the airbox, that could be the end result. And its signature is kind of clean scoring all the way around, as opposed to carbon fouled scoring. Let's see what we got next. Oil failure. I don't see this hardly ever. Not too many people are running cheap or inappropriate oil in their dirt bikes, but it's good to have the picture, because if you hold your piston up next to that photo and it looks like that, you found your result, your culprit. Lubrication conflict. And this is a really good one because it can happen between synthetic and mineral oils, but more often it's a conflict between castor oils and mineral synthetic oils. If you run castor oil, you have to stick with castor oil. Typically, synthetic and mineral oils will intermix, but if you want to be safe, you should stay with what you've got. So the things that stand out about this type of failure are along the ringland and on the crown of the piston, there's a crusty, waxy buildup. You don't see that in anything else. And then down here in the crankcase, the different oils won't mix with each other. So they're rejecting blending, which is why you get this pattern almost like curled milk. So if you see that, or you see this crust packed into your rings, you've got a conflict between the two different types of premix oils that you've run. Piston scuffing. Scuffing on the exhaust side with no marks corresponding on the inside. And then this is thermal loading of oil film due to poor quality oil. Again, I don't see that very often. I can take a look at this 465 piston, and we've got a signature on the exhaust side that matches, but we've got sympathetic seizures on the back. And we're going to get to what causes that, I think, right up here next. So we got piston ring cylinder scuffing. Number one cause, improper break-in. Lack of oil in the mixture, excessive loading, or poor quality oil. The blowhole through the top of the piston, ignition timing failure, erratic firing. This can also be caused by vacuum leaks, also known as air leaks. But there's some things going on here with the seizure. They feel that's more of an ignition timing failure. Piston dome detonation. This is pre-ignition leading into detonation. The advance on your ignition timing is probably a little too hot. You might be using the wrong heat range spark plug or too low of an octane fuel. Foreign material. So anytime you get material banging the top or side of your piston, something's come apart. And the important message here is disassembly is required of the entire engine to find any additional material or damage and locate the source. There's no getting around it. For years, I've seen guys try to flush the crankcase out with gasoline. You're just setting yourself up to have to rebuild that bike again right after the next ride. Piston scoring, material damage. This score here is caused by some kind of a material broke loose somewhere, probably a needle bearing off the crankshaft. Sometimes a little end will come off one of those needles, and then it ends up getting jammed in between the piston and cylinder wall. Piston fracture. This is where the skirts are broken off the piston, and this is really only caused by one thing, and that's excessive wear. You've used that top end way past its serviceable ability, and the piston slap becomes so much that it cracks and breaks the intake or exhaust skirts off the piston. Multi-failure. Carbon deposits found within the damaged areas of the piston The engine has run after a previous failure. When this occurs, the piston shape and function is compromised. Failure threshold levels are reduced and temperatures of the engine can normally, failure threshold levels are reduced and the temperatures the engine can normally operate at are no longer valid. So, got one right here. When you hold it up to this picture, there's a lot of similarity with the carbon smears and all the deep damage in the piston. And this guy even has a hole forming in the crown. So I was not there, but I was around when this failure happened, and I told the owner, do not run that bike, and he chose to run it, and that's the end result. And this is a CR60, and you know how precious the parts are to come across for those. So we've got our multi-failure, so you can have multiple things take it out. And then here's our sympathetic seizure marks. Piston creates sympathetic seizure opposite side of the initial failure due to the floating nature of the piston within the cylinder. Inspection from the exhaust port can often see damage opposite the original damage area. So this is an RM465, which has a side port exhaust, which is why the primary damage is right here. This had an air leak, which caused it to get really hot on the exhaust. And then as this swelled, then it got it on the opposite side. So there's a complete seizure from, it was probably bad crank bearings and leaky crank seals. And that brings us to the conclusion of our demonstration today. One last thing that I'd like to throw in, if you experience a failure of these natures, the very first thing you want to do after you push your bike back to the truck is do a leak down test on the engine. Once you disassemble the engine, you've lost all opportunity to find other clues that may have led to these failures. I have found that airtight engines are extremely difficult to seize up. So you always want to look for an air leak first thing through. Again, this information is courtesy of the Rotex Flying Club. I intend to revisit this topic with different piston failure charts, as I have about a half a dozen of them. And it seems like no one chart covers every single possible scenario. So definitely save this one, and as we go through time, we'll be adding a few more to your library. And I thank you for joining us today on Next Time Try This, but don't try that. See ya.